Part 4, Specification and Procurement. 43. Specification and Procurement. Fire doors are very familiar pieces of equipment that building owners and occupiers will interact with regularly, but their complexity is often overlooked by those involved in the procurement and selection process. 44. Aesthetics. Door aesthetics will be a main consideration in the selection of doors. For this reason, there is very often a quality and finish demarcation, determined by which doors will be front of house and which are back of house. This may also impact on whether the doors should be made from wood, steel, or composite materials. Apart from potential budgetary constraints, what the door looks like will also be influenced by the need to comply with Fire Code and Part M of the building regulations with regard to minimum required door widths, vision panels to provide visibility to the other side of the door, visual contrasts of the various door set components to aid those with visual impairment, and size and types of handle to improve accessibility. 45. Fire rating. The fire rating of a door is an essential factor in door selection. It will be dependent on individual circumstances and what is required. The rating requirements should be determined by a fire safety engineer and reflect the fire safety strategy for the building. Their report will detail the required fire integrity of doors as being 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or something else. They should also specify if a smoke seal will be necessary. Those interpreting requirement and specifying and procuring fire doors and their accessories should require that test evidence should be presented to prove that required fire ratings will be achieved. All should form part of the building's golden thread of information. 46. Provision of fire doors and wall compartmentation rating. The table on the provides an overview of door classifications and ratings. There is a common misunderstanding that a 60-minute wall should contain a fire door of the same rating, in fact to comply with approved document B of the building regulations, as shown in Table B1. Provision of fire doors and FT30 is permissible providing the door is not contained in a wall between separate buildings when a 60-minute door is the minimum requirement. 47. Fire resistance, integrity, insulation and stability. Fire doors are rated on their overall fire resistance, which independently comprises integrity, insulation, and stability. The terms are defined as fire integrity. This is the extent over a given time that the component can withstand and prevent fire as well as smoke from breaching the barrier. The letter for denoting integrity is E. Insulation. This is the extent over a given time that the component can withstand and prevent the transfer of heat from one compartment to another. The letter for insulation is I. Stability. This is the extent over a given time to resist collapse as a result of the heat from a fire whilst maintaining its performance. This reading is denoted by the letter R. For 30-30 or 60-60 marked on glazing, the first digit before the slash shows the time in minutes that the component meets the integrity requirements under the performance criteria, while the second number after the separator shows the insulation performance. So 60-30 would mean 60 minutes integrity and 30 minutes insulation. 48. Typical specification. On new build and refurbishment projects, price will also be a prime consideration, as by the rules of the competitive tender process it is understood that the lowest bid price will often be awarded the work. This provides an incentive for those pricing the work to seek out the cheapest way to fulfill the requirement, so a specification calling for no more than that FT30 doors are to comply with building regulations and all relevant legislation and standards can expect in return the lowest possible quality of door to fulfill this criterion, which is often not suitable for its location. 49. Other considerations, criticality and usage. Other considerations including criticality and usage should be taken into account in the specifying of fire doors. Not all fire doors protect the same level of risk and some are critical to the overall level of fire safety within a building. In particular, some buildings are more dependent on fire doors than others to contain a fire, protect those at risk and enable the safe evacuation of occupants, or their protection if a stay-put policy is the stipulated or given fire strategy. Usage. Not all fire doors are subject to the same level of usage. Some will need to be more robust than others in terms of usage and possible abuse. If criticality and usage are fully considered and understood at the design, selection and installation stages, then it is more likely that doors appropriate to the occupancy and use will be specified, procured and suitably maintained. 50. Association of Specialist Fire Protection, ASFP. Considering fire doors in terms of criticality is in keeping with the views of the ASFP, who in their Guide to Inspecting Passive Fire Protection for Risk Assessors 2012 states fire doors are crucial in protecting the means of escape in any building. Not all fire doors protect against the same hazard, and doors serving single-direction means of escape and protected stairways are more critical than others in less demanding situations. 51. Building a Safer Future report. The concept of different levels of risk is also one of the main themes in post-Grenfell fire Building a Safer Future, which states that consideration of where the potential impacts associated with a fire are likely to be greatest and where there is evidence that fires are more prevalent in practice. It sets out that the likelihood of fire and fatalities is greater in purpose-built multi-occupancy higher-risk residential buildings, HRRBs, that are 10 stories or more in height, also highlighting other potentially higher-risk buildings as including a wider set of residential buildings below 10 stories or other residential buildings where people sleep, such as hospitals or care homes, which are normally less than 10 stories high and will have vulnerable people sleeping within them. 52. The Building Safety Act. The Building Safety Act 2022 should be taken into account in the selection, maintenance and refurbishment of fire doors. It provides a new framework for the design, construction and occupation of higher-risk buildings, defined as those having at least 18 meters or 7 stories in height and comprising of at least 2 domestic premises, also hospitals and care homes during their design and construction. 53. Risk Usage Matrix. Designers, fire engineers, building owners, occupiers and risk assessors should be tasked with specifying fire door sits in buildings according to 4 categories. Those that protect high risk and are high usage areas, protect high risk and are low usage areas, protect low risk and are high usage areas, protect low risk and are low usage areas. This approach takes into account the type, size and occupancy of building, the building's evacuation strategy, other factors such as the strategic importance of the building and assets in an area. For example, the value of plant and machinery behind a fire door, the inception and propagation hazards and business continuity considerations. By employing such methods to categorize fire doors, specifiers should be able to make more appropriate fire door choices, while building occupiers will be able to tailor their maintenance and inspection regimes to take into account the criticality, usage and of each door. The end result should be the desired mixture of low ongoing maintenance costs and adequately maintained fire compliance to a required standard. 54. Progressive horizontal evacuation. To support progressive horizontal evacuation, door sets in existing occupied buildings should be categorized to help clarify the level and frequency of inspection that may be required. In buildings with a progressive, phased horizontal evacuation strategy or a stay-put policy, determining which doors are protecting high risk must factor in adequate compliance for the strategy to take place. 55. High risk and high usage. Doors in high risk, high usage areas must be installed to a robust standard and then effectively inspected, managed and maintained to an equally high standard. The program of inspection and maintenance reflecting that high traffic usage doors are likely to suffer high levels of wear and tear. To reflect this, an unambiguous planned preventative maintenance (PPM) scheme should be established along with a golden thread digital paper trail to evidence information on specification and installation standards, and a robust inspection and maintenance regime by suitably qualified persons. Issues to be considered for such doors include: can and should doors be held open by suitable hold-open devices to create easy access and prevent damage? Should the core of the door leaf be specified to provide severe duty capability? Should the hinges and door closers be to a higher specification than other doors in the building? Should high-risk, high-usage doors be inspected to a higher standard than other doors, especially at installation, handover? Are they and should they be approved Document M, ADM, compliant? Should they be given additional protection such as cladding and edge cuffs in order to anticipate and minimize impact damage? 57. High risk and low usage. For high risk and low usage doors, issues to be considered include: what is a suitable and sufficient specification? Should they be fitted with a door closer? Should they be kept locked? What is the appropriate door signage? Should they be inspected to a high standard at installation, handover? How often and to what standard do they require inspection thereafter? Do they, especially for refuge area doors, require controlled leakage rates for door threshold gaps? Should they be and are they ADM compliant? Should glazing offer heat protection, i.e. insulation as well as fire integrity? 58. Low risk and high usage. Most high-usage fire doors in buildings with normal levels of risk and where a total simultaneous evacuation is in place will come under this category. There should be a focus on both easy access and quality of specification. This is to prevent excessive long-term maintenance costs. Issues to be considered for such doors include: should they be fitted with a hold-open device where appropriate? What is a suitable and sufficient specification? Are they ADM compliant? Should they be inspected to a high standard at installation, handover? How often and what level of inspection is appropriate, suitable and sufficient, thereafter? 59. Low risk and low usage. Numerous fire doors can come under this category, subject to the type and occupancy of the building and assuming that immediate, simultaneous evacuation is the evacuation strategy. A typical example would be a training or meeting room in a single-story building where the door will only open and close several times a day and where everyone would be expected to evacuate in a matter of seconds. Issues to be considered for such doors include: what is the lowest acceptable specification? To what extent must they be ADM compliant? Is there a high acoustic requirement? What level of inspection is required at installation, handover? How often and what level of INSP? These door sets should still be functional fire doors, especially in terms of cold smoke protection, and should be expertly fitted and fully certified, but it may be appropriate for the door composition to be of a lower specification than found elsewhere in the building. Issues to be considered for such doors include: what is the lowest acceptable specification? To what extent must they be ADM compliant? Is there a high acoustic requirement? What level of inspection is required at installation, handover? How often and what level of inspection is appropriate thereafter?